This is a tutorial to demonstrate how using a grid can make an accurate drawing easier and more reliable. To begin, I'm going to take my ruler across the top of my 9x12 piece of paper. I'm going to create a line at each 1-inch mark at the top, middle, and bottom of the page. By doing this, I can create an accurate mark all the way across the page to create a vertical line that's completely straight. Now that I have all of my vertical lines on the page, I'm going to turn the paper horizontally and repeat the process. Again, I'm putting a dot at each 1-inch mark all the way to 12 in the top, middle, and bottom of the page. I will now connect these 3 dots and make a full page of 1-inch squares. Now we need the same amount of squares on the photograph that we're going to transfer over to the blank paper. For this project, I'm going to be using a self-portrait. We use a 9x12 piece of paper, so I need 9 squares going across the top of my picture and 12 squares going down the side of my picture in order to create the same amount of squares on both papers. In order to make that happen, for this particular picture, I'm going to need to make my squares 3/4 inches wide by 3/4 inches wide. Now that we have that taken care of, let's start transferring the image over to our blank squares. I'm going to carefully draw what I see in each individual corresponding square in my blank grid over from my photograph. If you look over to the left, you'll notice that I have my photograph numbered. That kind of helps me keep track of where I am on my blank grid. Pay special attention to the placement of each line inside the square. Don't try to think about drawing an eyeball or eyelashes or flowers for that matter. Really break it down into the lines and allow your brain to abstract the images so that way it's easier for you to draw what's really there instead of what you think it should be. Now that you've done drawing, go back and erase with your eraser all of your grid lines. This is why it's super important to draw your lines and your details in your picture with a super light hand, not pressing too hard into the paper to leave an indentation or make a mark that's too hard to erase. Now to start adding value. Before I begin, I want you to notice that I have a piece of paper, just scratch paper, folded up underneath my hand. This is going to create a barrier between me and the paper, so that way I don't create that nasty smudge mark that dirties up the page while I go. At this point, I want you to think back to your value scale we created earlier in the week. Remember, we need to have our darkest darks all the way to our lightest lights to create a full dimension and depth in our picture. The hair on my portrait is extremely dark compared to the majority of the rest of the picture, so that's where I'm starting. That way I get a good base to realize and know how dark I need to go. I'm using my blending stump to help draw in some of those lighter shadows and create depth in my face, helping to round out the forehead as well as the eyelid. Pay special attention to the eye here. Notice that I have a full range of value just in the eye itself. The eyebrow has dark, wispy lines that are very defined. The eyelid itself is soft and rounding throughout the dark to a lighter shade, and the eyeball is not white. There's lots of slight shadows in the edges that help it to appear round. As I continue to develop my details and my shadows and highlights, notice that I'm paying special attention to the picture. I'm not going off of what I think it looks like. I'm actually studying the photograph and making sure I can get as close to that as I can and keeping my darkest dark, my middle grays, and all the way to my highlights. You will also notice that I go back and forth between the pencil and the blending stump. This helps keep my values smooth, as well as helping me to get that full range of value that I'm looking for. As I finish up my image, I'm going to fine detail some of my highlights as well as sharpen up some of my shadows with the tip of my pencil and just really define it the way that I want it to look, so that way I've got a clear, crisp black and white image on only half of my face. Now that we have one side of the face completely filled in with our value to create an accurate portrait, we're going to stop and look at traditional Dia de los Muertos makeup. This is how we are going to complete the other half of the face to give us a pop of color as well as a taste of another culture. Now that we have one side of the face completely filled in with our value to create an accurate portrait, we're going to stop and look at traditional Dia de los Muertos makeup. This is how we are going to complete the other half of the face to give us a pop of color as well as a taste of another culture. Once your drawing is complete, take your pencil and create a 5-block small value scale at the top of the page. You're going to use this to fill in different portions of your sugar skull just to practice those values once again. You're not creating depth this time, just the value itself. Thanks guys, I can't wait to see what your portraits look like.